Good morning. Welcome to Abundant Life Homestead, where 4 days a week I go live during my quiet time. That's my part of the morning between when Melinda leaves for work and the boys leave for school, and I get Grandma up and get her started for the day. And you get the later part of my quiet time, the last 40 minutes or so, which I devote to Bible study. And the way I do this, I use the Connections Bible Study, which comes from our church and is taken from the Revised Common Lectionary, which is used by churches and denominations, millions of Christians around the world. So when we study Scripture during the week, we are studying the same Scriptures, maybe not the same day, but we are studying the same Scriptures in the same week that the Christians all over the world are studying. And the way we do this, I come in and have an off-the-cuff study. I don't try to study ahead, see what all the scholars say about it. Try to show that the Bible is meant to be easy to understand. The Word of God says that His Word is a lamp unto our feet, a light unto our path. He comes to us right here, right now. Now, those deep studies are good for us at times, but it shows that it's not necessary. We can sit down, open the Bible, see how we understand it right now, see how God's Word makes connections to our lives, and use that as a foundation to build on as we go throughout our lives. And during the day, if we start this first thing in the morning, then during the day we make those deeper connections with the Word. And that gets us curious, that gets us looking for that deeper study, deeper connection. And as David, by the time we're in the night watches, we're in bed dwelling and meditating on what we've studied and learned through the day, we do gain a much deeper understanding. So this is just the start of it, the planting the seeds, the building the foundation early in the morning with God's Word. Hope everyone is well this morning. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Ours was pretty good. We did have some pretty terrible storms going through last night. I haven't seen any damage reports from the area, but the storm kind of showed some grace to us, or God showed some grace to us in the storms, because they got real bad to the north of us, they got real bad to the south of us. We had this beautiful cloud line roll through that I posted in the community posts on my YouTube page, but we hardly got rain. We only got a little wind, and it's just wet enough to make things grow. So we really the storm dodged us yesterday. Melinda says didn't see much on the morning commute. Yeah, I can't imagine there was a whole lot of damage in our area. I was watching Lafayette though last night. Highest recorded wind in Lafayette last night was 85 miles an hour, and the highest reported wind was over 100. So they got some pretty good damage up there. And then just south of us, Connorsville, they had a tornado on the ground, but I haven't heard if there was any damage out of that, or if it just went over farmland that hasn't been planted yet. I don't know. So it split and went around us, and we can thank God for that, for sure. So otherwise, hope everybody's happy and healthy today. As happens with most big weather events, I woke up this morning, eyes are all puffy, little more in my throat and sinuses than I like. Those big storms, they tend to bring in pollens that none of us are used to. So I may have to wear my glasses a little more than normal, because I can hardly read the chat screen. So getting into this morning's reading, today Today being Monday, March the 31st, 2025. On Mondays, we read a gospel passage. And today's gospel passage is John chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. See what we got here. Open my Bible. John 12, 1 through 8. It's titled Mary Anoints Jesus. I'll read this out of the Amplified Bible. Verse 1. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus went to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom he had raised from the dead. So they gave a supper for him there. Martha was serving, and Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took a pound of very expensive perfume of nard, and she poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, who was going to betray him, said, "Why is this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" Now he said this not because he cared about the poor, for he had never cared about them, but because he was a thief, and since he had the money box serving as a treasurer for the 12 disciples, he used to pilfer what was put into it. So Jesus said, "Let her alone, so that she may keep the rest of it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." Okay. Got a little side note here right up at the top. There were 2 anointings of Jesus, this one in Bethany by Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus, and the other in the area of Galilee by an unnamed woman. And then it talks about the nard. We'll get to that in a second. So 6 days before the Passover, Jesus went to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom he had raised from the dead. So we're within a week of when Jesus would be handed over to Pilate and crucified. And Jesus, he knows that we're into the last week of his life. And one interesting thing when you get into all of the Gospels, we see so much written about Jesus in the Gospels, during what was written during his life, what was written with the words that he says, and we think there's a lot to it, but we find out when we look that almost half of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, almost half of the Gospel is written in Jesus' last week of his life. If we had the years and years of time that these men spent with Jesus, we would have volumes the size of our Bible is each of these books, but we don't get that. We get the important stuff though. The last week of Jesus' life was so important that almost half of the Gospels, half of each gospel, is dedicated to this last week of his life. So we're getting into this last week of his life. Everything is everything that he had said was going to happen is starting to come into play. And I think in John the story is pretty much right before this, where he raises Lazarus. If you remember, the family was crying and told Jesus that, if he had been there, Lazarus wouldn't have died. And Martha really showed her faith and poured her heart out to Jesus. And he went and had them open the tomb. And this is where the shortest verse in the Bible comes in the chapter before this, where Jesus wept, and then he calls Lazarus forth, and Lazarus comes out of the grave. So this is the Lazarus, when you hear Lazarus come forth, this is the Lazarus we're talking about. This is the one he raised from the dead. This was his friend. Lazarus was a friend of Jesus. So a week before he knows he's going to die, he goes to see his friends. And Bethany was very close to Jerusalem, I believe. They say it would have taken 2 or 3 hours to get to Bethany. I believe. I could be wrong on that. So they gave a supper for him there. Martha was serving, and Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. This is one I always find interesting. If you see the old pictures, especially the Romans and the Greeks, and they're always laid back eating their grapes and whatever, this was more common than sitting at a table. We think of sitting upright in a chair at a table, everybody around, but that would have been more of a formal dinner. But to have a relaxing meal with friends. Think about if you're at home, you're sitting on the couch, you got your feet propped up on the cushions, you got a TV tray beside you, and you're sitting there watching TV, just relaxing. That is more of how they would sit and have supper. So when you see the reclining and eating in a lot of the ancient art, that was more common than sitting at a table having a formal dinner. So Jesus and Lazarus would have been reclining on these like little couches, love seat type things, and while the women were serving them. And none of that really means anything other than, hey, this kind of sticks out. So Mary took a pound of very expensive perfume of pure nard, and she poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of perfume. There's really a whole lot we can unpack here. A pound of very expensive perfume of nard. See what this says about the nard. I think I know what nard is, but this was a thick, scented oil obtained from the root of a flowering plant of the Himalayas of Tibet and in the northern regions of India and Nepal. Yeah, this came from very far away. They believe it was a essential oil extracted from the roots of the spikenard, a plant, in Tibet and Nepal, that area, the Himalayas. Think Mount Everest. That's about where it's at. And so this wouldn't have been something common. This wouldn't have been something local. This was something that came from 3,000 miles away. And for Mary, a Jewish woman, this may have very well been the most expensive thing she owned. This may have been her treasure, and we find more of that here real shortly. But this wasn't just a simple act of spraying a little perfume on him or getting something common like olive oil and washing his feet in that. No, this was a huge deal for her, doing what God really asks us all to do, to make sacrifice to him, to give him what we don't want to give up, to give him what we can't afford to give up, and not holding on to these things. Melinda says it would have been worth a year's wages and was often used for royalty. Yes, and we have no indication that Lazarus and Martha and Mary, that family, we have no real indication that they were even rich. They would have been a little better off than some, because Lazarus was in a tomb with a stone placed in front of it. So they would have had at very least a family tomb, or like a catacomb built into a mountainside. So they were a little better off than the average person, but they weren't royalty. They weren't emperors and governors, and probably not even at the level of Roman citizens. So this was a huge deal for her. But the beyond making this sacrifice to Jesus, the other huge deal is that she wiped his feet with her hair. For a Jewish woman to let down her hair in front of anyone other than her husband was was a shameful thing. It was shown as, it was seen as they had loose morals and whatnot. She put away this shame. She didn't even care what people thought about her. She was making a sacrifice to God without worrying what others thought, without worrying what others would say. She did the how is it that Paul said a few weeks ago? I don't remember the exact scripture we were studying, but let go of the things that are shameful. Don't worry about being ashamed in front of others if you're worshiping the Lord, and not even not even necessarily going as far as Mary did here, but something Pastor Todd talked about this week in the in his sermon. When you're around others, do you tell them about Jesus, or if they're mocking God or Christianity, do you join in, or do you stop them and speak up for God? Something that you would feel shame in doing that because you're around your friends and they would start mocking you. Would you still do that anyway? Would you give that up for him? Would you let down your hair and wipe his feet with your hair? And furthermore, beyond the perfume and the hair, just the very act of washing the feet was something that was for servants and slaves to do, not the woman of the house. So she put herself in this very low, humble position and made this sacrifice to God. Not only she made an expensive sacrifice to God, giving up treasure to God, giving up her shame to God, giving up her position to God. So we don't give that verse very much attention, but there's a whole lot right there in what Mary did that speaks to how we should be with Jesus. So verse 4, but Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples who was going to betray him, we know that now, said, why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor? So we just talked a little bit about this being expensive perfume from about 3,000 miles away. And as Melinda said, and there's a side note here that says about a year's wages for an ordinary workman. We often say that, and it does make an easy equation, but I'm kind of a numbers nerd and a coin nerd, especially when it comes to Roman coins. I collect Roman coins. And so I've actually got in here, I think there's some in this envelope. So just to give you a visual, I don't know if those will show up. I've got a handful of denarii here. And a single denarius is just a little silver coin. This is Roman Republic, so it's several decades before Jesus was born. But we say now that this was about a day's wages for the average person, and it was actually a little more than that. Sorry, I'm causing the white balance to go crazy. It's actually a little more than that, and to give you a little perspective here about what it is, put it next to a dime. It's hardly the size of a dime nowadays, and it's made of silver. But Caesar Augustus, the emperor or dictator of Rome at the time of Jesus' birth, the one who was born Octavian and became the first Augustus, he set the wages for legionnaires and skilled labor at 225 denarii a year. So we say about a day's wages, but it's really a little more than that on a day. And if we think about it in larger terms, it becomes a lot more than that. And actually, I keep it on my phone because, like I said, I'm kind of a numbers nerd and a coin nerd. But if we break that down, by average wages. Today, the Social Security Administration says that the average home or the average worker makes $66,622 a year. I think a lot of us are way below that, especially in this area. But if you divide that by the 225 denarii average wages of the Romans, that makes a single denarii, each of these denarii, by today's standards, not by today's value, but by today's standards, that's about $296.10 of today's wages. So you take that and you multiply it by the 300 denarii that Judas claims this is worth, $88,829.33. So, we're talking in just a minute about, he's Judas putting a value on Mary's love, but this gives you not to worry about the money aspect of it, but it kind of gives you an idea of just what Mary was giving up to God. You think about it in today's terms, and in this, in Lent, we're talking about giving up to God what we don't necessarily want to. We're giving up to God what we can't necessarily afford to give Him. This would be like the average person, not a rich person, the average American, buying an $89,000 car and giving it to the church. And to them, that may be what God called them to do. Buy this car and give it to the church. But the people around them are going to be kind of shocked. They're going to scoff at it. Why in the world would you do that? So that's kind of what Judas is expressing here. But the real thing, two things. Number one, he's got his own hidden sin, his own selfish desire. Melinda says, I had to step away, so I know I missed a lot. Did we talk about the significance of her hair? Yes, I talked a lot about how letting her hair down in front of anyone other than her husband would have been a shameful thing. And, she was giving up that shame for Christ. And you'll have to go back and watch it, honey, if you want. But if you have more to add to it, go right ahead, even if it's something I've already said. Please do add it to the chat, and we can always discuss it again. But Judas has this sin that he's hiding. Obviously, he's not hiding his sin from Christ. Christ knows, but he may think he's hiding that sin from Christ. Where he's got this own selfish desire because he's a thief. He's the treasurer for the disciples, and he skims money off the top. So he claims that he's concerned about the poor, but he's really thinking, man, if we sold that for 300 denarii and I put that in the coffers, nobody even noticed if I skimmed off about 10% of that. And he realizes he's not going to get that. Oddly enough, it just came to mind. I was thinking that if he skimmed off 10% and nobody would notice, 10% of the value of that perfume is just about what he sold Jesus for 32 pieces of silver. See what Melinda says. Going back to the hair. The Bible also talks about a woman's hair being her glory. So this is another symbol of her giving him everything that she has. Absolutely. Got another side note here. Let me read that before we go back. Oh, I guess no, it's what we already said about a year's wages, and we see that in when we crunch the numbers, it was much more than a year's wages. But it was, Jesus tells us where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, and she gives her treasure to Jesus. She uses her treasure for Jesus, and Judas puts a monetary value on that treasure. And the thing is, it wasn't just Judas. I believe I'm looking down here. I don't even have any notes down here. I believe it's in Mark. This when the same story is told in Mark. Like all of the disciples were shocked. All of the disciples showed a little, at very least, kind of discomfort in what she was doing, and it was Judas that spoke out and said it. But just like I said, if the average person put everything they had into buying something, the example of a car, and then giving it away, and all the people around them would be shocked about it. The disciples were also, even the disciples who weren't going to betray Jesus, they were all kind of, whoa, that's crazy. But Judas he has these ulterior motives. He puts up this facade that many Christians do today, where on the outside it seems like they're a follower of God. He's right there with Jesus. He's one of his disciples. But as we talked about in Psalms last week with David, there's this misery eating away at him because he was hiding that sin. Judas is going through the same thing, and not only miserable from the guilt of his sin, but miserable because he's about to miss out on a big payday, because that's money he could have been slipping into his own pocket. So he makes himself known about. He could have given it to the poor. Now he said this not because he cared about the poor, for he had never cared about them, but because he was a thief, and since he had the money box serving as a treasurer for the 12 disciples, he used to pilfer what was put into it. We just talked about all that. So Jesus said, "Let her alone, so that she may keep the rest of it for the day of my burial." And that's the thing when we talk about, we talk about this oil and this treasure that she gave up to Jesus. For one, her doing this is kind of why waste it on the dead? Use it on Christ while he's alive. But yeah, this would have been a funerary oil. Like they didn't embalm people back then. They would wrap them in linen, and they would put perfumes and flowers and stuff in the linen cloth. The think of a mummy, wrapped in these strips of cloth. That cloth was there to soak up these fragrances and kind of hide the stink of the body. And her having this nard, this spikenard essential oil that would have been used for royalty, if nothing else, if not being sold, if not being used for something better, as a treasure, as a family treasure for her, a full pound of this stuff could have been used to put on to anoint the bodies of at least 6 or 8 of her family members. So he's saying, "Let her alone, so she may keep it for the day of my burial." There's still plenty here. Leave her alone. There's still plenty here. She's using some on me now. She doesn't. Why waste it on the dead when I'm here now? Use it on the living, so the living can enjoy the sweet perfume, instead of pouring it on a dead body and not and rolling a stone in front, and nobody really smells it anyway after that point. So leave her alone. There's still plenty left. She's offering me everything, but she's not having to use it all on me. And you will always have the poor with her, but you do not always have me. The poor can always be taken care of in different ways, and when you look at the what Judas is kind of throwing his fit about, you could have sold it, but You think about like resale today, or whatever, flea market or whatever. You take something really expensive that is used by expensive people. For one, you're not going to get the full value of it. For two, the actual item isn't never gonna do the poor any good. And Jesus is saying you'll always have the poor. You'll always, not just that there will always be poor. Not just that there will always be poverty, but you'll always have this way to take care of the poor. You'll always have there will always be a way to manage with the poor. There will always be things you can do for the poor. But I'm only here a short time. You only have me for a very little time. You do not always have me. And in speaking directly at Judas, Judas always did have him, I guess, but he never really had Jesus. He always had that heart for deceit. Even though we only really see, other than Judas's betrayal of Jesus, this is the only other place where they really tell us something terrible, something sinful that he had done. Oh, I just closed it, and Melinda's talking about a note in the Passion Translation. There's also a note in the Passion Translation that since it was often used for royalty, that the soldiers would have smelled it on his feet during his crucifixion and made the connection. Oh, that's something I didn't even think about, because a strong oil like that, I mean, it's not like they jumped in the shower every day. A strong oil like that put on your skin, yeah, they'd have still smelled that a week later at his crucifixion. And anybody, yeah, they would have made that connection that this, you do have the one Roman soldier that says this truly is the Son of God. Not because he would have smelled that on his feet, but he would have. The soldiers around him definitely would have at least caught the scent of that oil on Jesus, that royal oil. And to say, hey, somebody sees this man as royalty. I don't know why I'm pulling out my keyboard unless I want to. Just in case I decide I want to get up on Gemini here. But, so, that's all I've really got for it today. I do think we'll look in here. Come up here. How does the Bible passage, John 12, 1 through 8, to our lives? See if it gives us a short read or a long one. Mary anoints Jesus with expensive perfume, holds several relevant connections to our lives today. Here's a breakdown. Extravagant devotion. Mary's act is one of extravagant love and devotion. In today's world, this challenges us to consider how we express our love and devotion to what we hold sacred, whether it is our faith, our relationship, or our values. And take what you hold sacred. That kind of gets where we, take what you treasure, take what you hold sacred, take what you have put in the place of God and put it at His feet. The contrast between Mary's act and Judas's reaction highlights the clash of different values. Judas focused on the monetary value of the perfume, while Mary focused on honoring Jesus. Resonates today as we navigate a world often driven by materialism. This passage encourages us to examine our priorities and ensure they align with our deepest values. Understanding and misunderstanding. Mary understood the significance of Jesus' impending death, while others did not. This reminds us that the people often have different levels of understanding, and we should strive for empathy with them. Also shows how actions of love can be misunderstood and how we must remain true to our hearts. Serving and honoring. The passage also touches on the importance of serving and honoring. Mary's act was a form of service, and Jesus accepted it as an act of honor. It is still very relevant today, where we are called to serve others and to honor those who are worthy of it. The presence of the poor. Jesus' statement, "You will always have the poor among you," is not an excuse to ignore poverty. It is a statement of reality, and that our acts of service to others should be done when we can. This is a constant reminder that we have a responsibility to help those less fortunate. In essence, John 12, 1-8 invites us to reflect on our own expressions of love, our values, and how we choose to honor and serve others. Okay. I'll let it have most of that. A lot of that's what we talked about. Melinda says, whoops. Camera. There we go. Melinda says, "I really like this passage, and it has a lot of significance for our lives today, but it is Monday, and Mondays are hard." Yes, Mondays are very hard. I don't think think all of us had a little bit of a rough night last night too, so that made it a little difficult this morning to get moving, feeling a little rough, but yeah, and it is a really very, even though it's very short, and we a lot of it's just intrinsic things, like he went to Bethany, and he was sitting at the table. There is so much we can unpack in what Mary did and what Jesus said, that if I was more of a learned person, or had put a lot of study into it, you could spend all day talking about what happened here at Lazarus's house. So what else we got? About 4 minutes left. Don't know what we got today. I do have boys have ham radio club this morning. Not this morning, this afternoon. So I gotta pick them up. I'll pick them up from school and take them to ham radio club. And the club officers sent me a message asking if I could bring my electronics kit, because they needed to make some connections and stuff. I actually taught them how to do it about 2 weeks ago when I brought my stuff. So I think now they're going to do some practice on it with changing some connections on their own radios. Other than that, not too much going on today. I'll record my reading short that I'll put up later. Oh, Melinda says, real quick, Jesus was quick to critique Mary, but she didn't even acknowledge him. She knew that Jesus was all that mattered, not the opinion of man. Yeah, that's another thing that can really be unpacked. She honestly, nowadays, doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman on either side. When someone ridicules you for something that you're doing, when you know what you're doing is right, how often do you snap up at them, and it doesn't say that Mary did that, and I imagine that she didn't, because she was so focused on her Lord that it didn't matter what Judas thought. It didn't matter what the rest of the disciples thought, and Jesus handled it. And maybe that's something that went through her head while she was doing this, and while she was getting ridiculed really for it. I'll even give that to the Lord, and he'll handle it. He can take it. He will. He'll handle it for me. I'll give you a minute here, Melinda, see if you have any last minute words, but before we close out. But otherwise, yeah, I'm kind of been really up in the air about whether or not I should take the cameras to Ham Radio Club. I know the men that are the officers, they wouldn't mind. Actually, two of the three of them are pastors, and I know, with my children, I've had my children on my videos. I wouldn't mind, but we do sometimes get other children in there, and if I'm trying to teach and share stuff, and trying to keep other people's children out of my videos at the same time, that might not work. So I haven't got much into deciding whether or not to do that, to video at Ham Radio Club. I did get a little bit of interest from others in making more ham radio videos, so we'll see how the future goes. I may make some, but they probably won't be at the club meetings, because it really is a kids club. It's a school club, and I'm able to be part of it because 3 of my children are in it. But otherwise, we've passed that 9 o'clock point. It's time for me to go see if Grandma's awake and get her breakfast started, I believe. And I don't know if she's awake. I know her lights were on awful late last night, but we'll find out. I didn't see them on early this morning, so she may be asleep. She may be awake sitting in her chair. Oftentimes she's sitting there studying her Bible, but I've tried to give her copies of our Bible study, and she wants to do hers differently, and that's fine too. But she doesn't do it every morning that way. She does like to read when she wakes up, though. So anyway, I'm gonna go get the day started. Thank you all for watching. Until tomorrow. Tomorrow is Tuesday. New Testament passage, Philippians 3, verses 4b through 14, if you want to jump ahead. Until tomorrow, thank you. Keep on nourishing your dreams, cultivating your passions, embracing the beauty of God's creation. I hope you have a wonderful and blessed day, and we'll see you then.